Javonte Williams just might have handed Dallas the biggest bargain contract of the entire offseason, and nobody outside of Cowboys Nation is talking about it yet. But we're about to break down exactly why this 3-year deal could be the blueprint for how to build a championship roster without breaking the bank. And before we dive into the numbers, hit that subscribe button right now, because we're covering every Cowboys move the second it happens. And with how quiet this front office has been about their actual strategy, you need a channel that cuts through the noise and brings you the real analysis. So smash subscribe, because we're growing this community, and I need you locked in for what's coming this season. Here's the situation, and it's wild when you actually step back and look at what Jerry Jones and the front office pulled off, because while everyone was screaming about them being cheap and not making splashy moves, they quietly locked up a legitimate starting caliber running back for 3 years and $24 million, with only $8 million guaranteed. And I know what you're thinking, that sounds like decent money for a guy who's had injury questions and hasn't been a household name, but stay with me, because when you compare this deal to what's been happening around the league the last couple weeks, it starts to look like absolute highway robbery for Dallas. Let me paint the picture for you, because just in the last few weeks we've seen 2 running backs in the AFC East get paid. And I mean paid in a way that makes the Javonte deal look like we signed him for grocery store coupons and a handshake. Breece Hall just got 3 years and $43.5 million with $29 million guaranteed, and Devon Achane locked in 4 years at $16 million per year with $32 million guaranteed. And here's the kicker. Javonte's entire contract is less than just the guaranteed money that Breece Hall got. Let that sink in for a second. The total value of our running back deal is lower than what the Jets committed in guarantees alone. And while both Hall and Achane are talented backs, and probably have higher ceilings than Javonte, the gap in production last season wasn't nearly as big as the gap in their paychecks. And that's where this gets interesting for Dallas, because they're not paying for potential or highlight reels, they're paying for proven production at a discount rate. The cap hits tell an even better story, especially in year 1. Where Javonte only costs $3.89 million against the cap, which is basically lunch money in today's NFL, and that number jumps up in 27 and 28. But here's the thing, those are structured with void years, which means if Dallas wants to, they've got flexibility to restructure or move on without completely destroying the salary cap. And flexibility is the name of the game when you're trying to keep a competitive roster together year after year, especially when you've got expensive pieces at quarterback, wide receiver, and on the defensive side of the ball. Now let's talk about what Javonte actually did on the field last season, because this isn't just about getting a cheap contract for a warm body. This is about getting top 10 running back production at a fraction of the cost, and the stats back this up in a big way. He finished 10th in carries, 9th in rushing yards, 13th in yards per carry among qualified backs, 11th in touchdowns, and he did all that while missing a game. So imagine what a full healthy season looks like. And this is where it gets even more impressive. He was 6th in yards after contact, which is a pure running back skill that shows he's not just benefiting from the offensive line he's creating on his own, and his efficiency numbers were elite, 8th in EPA per carry, and 10th in success rate among nearly 50 qualified running backs in the league. So you can make a legitimate argument that Javonte Williams was a fringe top 10 back last season at worst, and probably solidly in that range, if you weight the advanced metrics. And here's the crazy part, he's being paid like he's barely a top 20 guy. His contract ranks 17th in total value, tied for 18th in average annual value, 19th in guaranteed money, and 29th in cap hit for next season. So you've got a back who performed like a top 10 player, getting paid like he's a mid-tier rotational piece. And if you're building a roster and trying to maximize value, that is exactly the kind of deal you need to hit on. And it's exactly the kind of deal that gives you room to make moves elsewhere, whether that's extending your own guys or adding a free agent who can push you over the top. And here's what nobody is talking about when they clown the Cowboys for not spending big in free agency. The running back market right now is one of the few places in the NFL where you can actually exploit inefficiency and get real value for your dollar. Because while every other position has seen contracts explode with the rising salary cap, running backs have stayed relatively flat, and that creates opportunity. There's been this narrative that you should never pay running backs. And I get it, we all remember the Zeke contract and how that ended, and there's trauma there for Cowboys fans. I'm not going to pretend there isn't. But the difference between that deal and this one is night and day. Zeke got paid like a superstar at the peak of the market. Javonte is getting paid like a solid starter in a market that's been suppressed for years. And if you're going to invest at the position at all, this is how you do it. You find the value guys who can produce without demanding the bag, and you structure it in a way that doesn't handcuff you down the road. And that's exactly what Dallas did here. The alternative would have been to roll with a rotation of cheap one-year veterans like they did a couple years ago and hope someone emerges, or to spend a premium draft pick on a back. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you compare the Javonte deal to what rookie running backs are making, the veteran route starts to look even smarter than people realize. Let me give you a perfect example. Jeremiah. Love, the rookie back who just got drafted, is on a 4-year fully guaranteed deal worth $53 million, which breaks down to $13.26 million per year. And his cap hit is more than double what Javonte's is this season. So Dallas is getting a proven commodity who just had a top 10 season for less than half the cap cost of an unproven rookie. And yeah, Love has upside, and maybe he turns into a star, but he also might bust or take a year or two to develop. And in the meantime, you're paying him elite money just because of where he was drafted. And that's the trap of the rookie wage scale. It's great for quarterbacks and edge rushers and cornerbacks, but for running backs, it can actually work against you, because the contracts aren't based on position value, they're based on draft slot. So if you take a back in the first or second round, you're paying him like a premium player, whether he performs like one or not. Meanwhile, you can sign a guy like Javonte, who already proved he can handle a full workload in the NFL, and you're paying him $8 million a year with flexibility built in. And the gap in that cap hit between Love and Javonte, that difference alone could pay for multiple depth pieces or role players who actually contribute on game day. And when you're trying to build a 53-man roster, that kind of efficiency matters more than people want to admit, because championships aren't won by having 3 superstars and a bunch of nobodies. They're won by having depth and talent across the board, and deals like this are what allow you to have both. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, because it's going to blow your mind when you see how out of control the receiver market has gotten compared to running backs, and why Dallas might actually be onto something by investing at this position instead. There are 42 wide receivers in the NFL making more per year than Javonte Williams, and 46 of them have more guaranteed money than he does. And I'm not talking about just the superstars. I'm talking about guys like Romeo Doubs, Darius Slayton, Josh Palmer, and Tutu Atwell, who are all making over $10 million a year. And look, I'm not saying those guys are scrubs, but if you're doing a fantasy draft with real NFL players, and you had to choose between Javonte Williams and Romeo Doubs at similar contract values, you're taking Javonte 10 times out of 10, because he's a starting caliber player at his position, and some of those receivers are third options, or guys who disappear for weeks at a time. The market is just completely warped right now, where a mid-tier wide receiver 2 is getting paid more than a legitimate starting running back. And if you're a team that's smart about asset allocation, you should be taking advantage of that, because you can get similar or better value out of a running back at half the cost of what you'd pay for a receiver who might give you 6 catches a game. And that's the inefficiency I'm talking about. That's where Dallas can win by zigging while everyone else zags, and paying attention to where the value actually is, instead of just following the crowd and throwing money at the sexy positions. So where does this leave us heading into the season? And what does this mean for the Cowboys' roster construction and salary cap situation moving forward? Because that's what really matters, right? We can talk about value all day, but if it doesn't translate to wins, then who cares? The reality is this: if Javonte stays healthy and gives Dallas anything close to what he did last season, this contract is an absolute home run. and it's the kind of deal that allows the front office to be aggressive in other areas, whether that's extending Micah Parsons, or adding another piece on defense, or keeping flexibility for next offseason when there might be bigger fish to fry, and if for some reason it doesn't work out, if he gets hurt or regresses, they can move on after next season without creating a massive dead cap hit. And that's the beauty of the structure. It's team-friendly in every possible way. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this means Dallas is winning the Super Bowl because of a running back contract that would be insane. But what I will tell you is that building a championship roster is about making a dozen smart decisions like this one where you get value and you don't overpay and you create flexibility. And when you stack enough of those decisions on top of each other, you end up with a team that can compete year after year without having to blow it up and rebuild every 3 seasons. And maybe that's what Jerry and Steven are actually trying to do here, even if the process has been frustrating and quiet and not what we're used to seeing from America's team. Here's the other thing that matters, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. When we discuss contracts and cap hits and all the numbers, the locker room impact of having a guy like Javonte locked in for 3 years, because he's not just a name on a spreadsheet, he's a physical downhill runner who sets the tone in the fourth quarter when you need to run the clock out and put a game away. And last season, there were multiple times where Dallas leaned on him late and he delivered, and that kind of identity, that kind of physicality is what travels in the playoffs when the games get tight and the weather gets cold and you need to impose your will on the other team. You can't just throw the ball 40 times a game in January and expect to win, especially on the road, and having a back you trust who's locked in and knows his role and isn't worried about his contract because he just got paid. That's the kind of stability that helps a team take the next step, and it's the kind of move that might not make headlines in April but pays off in December and January when it actually counts. So, yeah, I'm a fan of this deal, and I think more people should be talking about it as one of the smarter moves Dallas has made in a while, even if it's not flashy, even if it didn't break the internet, even if casual fans don't care, because Javonte isn't a household name yet. And let's be real for a second, Cowboys Nation, because I want to hear from you on this one. Do you think this contract is a steal, or are you worried about the injury history and whether he can hold up over a full season and a playoff run? Because that's the only real question mark here, right? The talent is there, the production was there last season, the price is more than fair, but can he stay on the field? And if he can't, does this deal still make sense? Or does it become another example of Dallas getting cute and trying to bargain hunt instead of paying up for a sure thing? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now because I want to know where you stand. Are you in on Javonte or are you skeptical? And if you're still watching and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're building something special here at Blue and Silver Nation, and every single day we're breaking down the moves, the rumors, the cap situations, and everything you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. So hit that subscribe button and join the family because we're just getting started and this season is going to be one heck of a ride. The bottom line is this: the Javonte Williams contract is a perfect example of how to find value in today's NFL. And if Dallas can keep making moves like this, where they're getting production without overpaying, and they're creating flexibility without sacrificing talent, then maybe we're looking at a front office that's finally figured out how to build a sustainable winner in the salary cap era. And after decades of big splashes and flashy moves that didn't lead to championships, maybe the quiet, boring, smart approach is exactly what this team needs. So let's see if it pays off. But right now, in this moment, based on what we know, this deal looks like a win, and I'm here for it.